Action News Tonight with John McKnight, Jill Becker, meteorologist Bob Richards, and Steve Buckhantz with sports.
Good evening. It will be a long night for members of the East Point Fire Department. Firefighters are on the scene of a warehouse fire that started late this afternoon. They've got to stay with it to make sure it doesn't spread to other nearby buildings. It didn't take long for flames to engulf the Atlanta kitchen and bath warehouse today. The building was full of flammable materials, mostly wooden cabinets. The sprinkler system in the building froze with the icy temperatures we've had lately. The pipes in the system burst before it could do any good. Ken Davenport owns the building, but he hasn't owned it for long.
We have leased the buildings for about 7 or 8 years, and 2 weeks ago I did purchase the building.
Now the building is a total loss. The investigation into the cause of the fire is underway. The owner says vagrants have been hanging around the building.
We've had a problem with vagrants sleeping in the van that we have up the hill here recently, and unless something like that might have caused it, I really would have no idea.
Firemen say putting the fire out completely will take all night. However, at this point, it is contained.
Like most other things in Atlanta last week, the weather interrupted the trial of Wayne Williams in Fulton Superior Court. This trial for the killings of 2 of Atlanta's youth murder victims will resume tomorrow. So far, 22 witnesses have taken the stand for the prosecution. Last week's 2 days of testimony focused on Williams' explanation about what he was doing on a bridge above the Chattahoochee River last May. Williams was seen on the bridge after police heard a splash in the river. A few days later, the body of Nathaniel Cater was found in the Chattahoochee. Members of the Georgia House of Representatives are preparing for an onslaught this week. Supporters of the Equal Rights Amendment are set to make one last big push as the House takes up the constitutional amendment. And the troops have already begun to get in formation. A group of women gathered this afternoon at this fashionable Buckhead home to give each other some moral support and raise some money for the cause. Among them, Mrs. Rosalind Carter with a message from herself and another former First Lady, Betty Ford.
I don't know how helpful it will be or how much attention it will get, but as Betty Ford said, she wanted all of her grandchildren to know she did every possible thing to pass to that.
These ERA supporters will converge on the Capitol this week, as will opponents of the Equal Rights Amendment. It will be a hard-fought battle, especially since it will probably be the final showdown for ERA, at least here in Georgia.
City officials from throughout Georgia are in Atlanta for the annual meeting of the Georgia Municipal Association. It's a chance for city officials to discuss what the GMA will ask the General Assembly for this year. The GMA is waiting to see if the legislature will agree to make up for the loss of federal funding for roads and water and sewer systems. The association is also seeking an increase in the hotel, motel, and mixed drink tax. The meeting continues through tomorrow. A Fort Gordon soldier is facing a life in prison sentence after being convicted of murdering a sergeant. A court-martial board convicted Henry Scott of shooting First Sergeant Carnell Frazier 3 times last October. Testimony indicated that Scott was living with his soldier girlfriend off base. When the couple started accumulating debts, the sergeant ordered Scott's girlfriend to move back on base. Scott then went to Sergeant Frazier's house and shot him to death.
An Eastern Airlines DC-9 blew a tire at takeoff from Hartsfield International Airport tonight. The plane carrying 116 passengers and crew was forced to return to the airport. When it did, the other tire under the left wing blew out. The plane landed safely and no one was hurt. Eastern spokesman Carolyn Will said that although the situation certainly isn't routine, it isn't all that unusual either. The plane was Flight 598 to Hartford. Passengers were all placed on a later flight. 2 airport runways were closed from just after 7 o'clock to around 8:30, while crews cleared away pieces of the rubber tires scattered across the runways. As a result, several flights were delayed tonight. After a week of unprecedented cold and snow in the metro area, we should warm up enough tomorrow to melt what's left of the ice on metro area roads. But for tonight, you should still use extreme caution if you have to drive anywhere. Although most heavily traveled roads are clear, there are still some patches of ice, and many side streets remain iced over and very dangerous. Most of that ice will still be on the roads as you head to work tomorrow, so be careful. And while most things will be back to normal tomorrow, the unscheduled winter vacation will continue for hundreds of students in the metro area. Several schools have already canceled classes for tomorrow, among them Atlanta public schools, along with schools in Cobb and DeKalb counties. This is a list of the school closings we've had reported to us so far. The continuing cold weather makes it difficult for officials to bring the heat in school buildings to a temperature that's acceptable for the students. Also, some schools may be experiencing some problems in receiving food deliveries, and of course the safety of students traveling to and from schools must also be considered. Many school buses must travel roads that are still iced over, although that situation should be corrected by the warmer weather expected tomorrow. We've also heard from several school systems that will reopen tomorrow. If you're still not sure whether you or your kids will have to be back in the classroom tomorrow, tune in to WSB AM radio at 7:50 on the dial for the latest list of school closings tomorrow morning. Coming up, Polish troops paraded through Warsaw today.
And in Washington, the cold weather hampered recovery efforts.
Hey, every card's got a winning combination, but my Godfather's Pizza numbers racket ain't for the chicken-hearted. If you win a prize, I'll play you double or nothing for it, if you got the nerve. See these two squares? Under one of them it says double, under the other, nothing.
We want a TV.
Okay, so you want a prize. I'll play you double or nothing for it.
Go for it. Let's do it. Come on.
We won 2 TVs.
Godfather's Pizza you can't refuse.
I just started working and didn't think I could afford an individual retirement account. But a First Atlanta IRA counselor showed me how I could start an IRA with any amount. And through payroll deductions, I can add to my account every month. She said if I put $2,000 in my account every year, in 20 years, I could have over $175,000. In 30, I could have over $650,000. Wow, there's a lot to be said for an IRA. But for the last word on IRAs, come in first.
On the next Entertainment Tonight, Jose Feliciano's had 37 gold records, but for 5 years, no recording contract.
It hasn't been easy.
Why couldn't he light a musical fire?
The people that handle the record companies of today are not as musically oriented.
Then the daytime soap stars who posed for Playboy.
There's a little more exposed than I had wanted. People just say, oh, I saw you in Playboy.
On the next Entertainment Tonight.
Coming Monday at 7:30 on Channel 2.
I've been driving cattle most of my natural life, and you're telling me I can't handle a stampede? Not this one, Buck.
Stampede by Activision for your Atari game system. One of the toughest video games around. Stampede's more than expert roping and riding. It's a test of strategy and skill.
Go ahead, you
Keep
do
your
it.
hands on the right.
Buck, you boys come in now.
Oh, Mom.
Stampede by Activision.
Divers at the wreckage of the Air Florida jet crash at the 14th Street Bridge in Washington had to postpone their grim search for victims in wreckage today. Temperatures were so cold that diving equipment froze. Divers had hoped to pull the cockpit and tail section of the plane out of the Potomac today. In the tail section are the flight box recorders. Investigators hope they'll get information from the recorders that will piece together how the crash happened. Meanwhile, there is speculation that an Atlanta man might be the man who sacrificed himself to save others after the crash. A man who might have been Arland Williams was hanging onto part of the plane in the water after the crash, along with a few other people. That man passed a lifesaver to the others with him. However, when the pilot brought the lifesaver back for him, the man was gone. So far, 46 bodies have been recovered. All except Williams died as a result of the crash. Williams drowned.
Despite the continuing military crackdown, Poles in Warsaw were in a festive mood today. Polish troops paraded through the city to mark the 37th anniversary of the liberation of Poland from Nazi Germany. Soldiers were dressed in uniforms from pre-Soviet camp days, prompting one elderly woman to remark they finally look like Polish soldiers. The day's observances included a half-hour memorial service for Poles who were victims of the Nazis during World War II. A Soviet expert on America today blamed the United States for complicating the situation in Poland. Georgy Arbatov said on CBS's Face the Nation that the military crackdown in Poland was necessary to avert civil war, but he claimed that the Soviets took no part in making that decision. Arbatov was very blunt when asked when martial law would be lifted.
I'm sure that Jaruzelski and the leadership of Poland do want to do away with it as soon as possible.
Dr. Arbatov.
And their only aim is normalization. Excuse me, I have to answer this important question. And I think that United States just now with this policy is not helping them, because what they do is encouraging the people who are against any compromise, against any settlement there.
And while Arbatov was defending the Soviet Union's role in Poland, a Soviet trawler today was a very conspicuous spectator for the test firing of a missile from the Navy's first Trident sub. The trawler, packed with sophisticated electronic equipment, at one point was less than 1,000 yards from the submerged USS Ohio, visible only by its red beacon and extended testing mast. Ships escorting the Ohio signaled the Soviet ship to leave, and 3 times Air Force helicopters hovered over the ship to give the same message. Finally, the unwelcome visitor left. Then, 40 minutes late, about 50 miles from the Florida coast, the Trident-1 ballistic missile was successfully test-fired. It traveled 4,000 miles in 40 minutes and hit a target in the South Atlantic, less than 2 city blocks in area.
The government is urging those eligible young men who have not yet registered for the draft to do so during a grace period the government is allowing. Officials say at least 800,000 youths have not registered for the draft. Details of the grace period are expected to be announced tomorrow. Federal officials say if the young men don't take advantage of the grace period, they'll be fined up to $10,000 and could get a 5-year prison sentence. France's socialist premier François Mitterrand was handed a political setback in today's National Assembly elections in France. Conservative candidates scored victories in all 4 of today's races. Those results, however, do not threaten the majority won by socialists in June. Mitterrand defeated conservative Giscard d'Estaing in May of last year to establish the first leftist government in France in 23 years.
It seemed like the perfect Sunday for raising money. Not only the WSB telethon for United Cerebral Palsy, but also a phonathon.
Hi, this is Dale Schwartz. I'm calling you today for Super Sunday for the Atlanta Jewish Federation. And to put additional pressure on both of us, I want you to know that there's a WSB-TV camera crew filming everything that I'm saying now, so there's no way that you can say no to me. How are you doing?
Dale Schwartz was just one of several hundred who came out to help raise money for the Atlanta Jewish Federation. The group hopes to raise $300,000 in Atlanta with this one telephone campaign. In the course of the year, they hope the total will go over $6 million. Over half the money goes to support social programs in Israel. A lot of the rest stays here in Atlanta to fund programs at the community center. Mickey Eisenberg says telling the people they call what the money is for usually sparks a donation.
We're all Jews, and we have to take care of those Jews who are less fortunate than we are. And there are Jews in Romania, there are Jews in Poland who get help from these dollars that we raise in Atlanta, Georgia, and all over America on January 17th on this Super Sunday day.
With similar phone drives in other cities, Jewish groups hope to raise $42 million today. Expect a turnabout in our weather tomorrow. Temperatures could reach as high as 50. Walton has the details coming up.